Hey, everybody. First of all, thank you very, very much for joining me with Dan Kern earlier today talking about the United States economy. And now it is my pleasure to introduce someone I actually wanted to meet for quite some time. And Marleen, welcome.
Thank you, Zenny.
Yeah, it's an honor to
We've
have
actually met before. We met once at one of Eka Schneider's bar get-togethers many years ago. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I remember. Oh, bloggers for Libby. It was either
I
or
can't
in.
remember it was a get-together sponsored by Eka Schneider at a bar in Uptown when she was doing her A Better Oakland blog.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that one. That was at. It was right next door. Later became Ozumo. It became Ozumo, something like that. But I remember now.
Okay.
Yeah. That was like 2010ish. That was a while back.
Yes, it was a long time ago.
Yeah. And we don't look like it. So anyway, this is something else of a scandal we got going here. I'm gonna. You sent me the gist of it, which is actually you sent me all of it, which is on OaklandNewsOnline.com, and I'm gonna read the first paragraph as per your request, and we'll go from there. How's that?
Sounds good.
Cool. Before I do that, why don't you tell them your background? You're quite the heck of a lawyer based in Oakland and Pleasanton, right?
Well, I'm exclusively in Oakland these days. So I practice mostly education and employment law. And for around 26 years, I was with a firm in Pleasanton. I left that firm about 2.5 years ago. I'm now on my own in Oakland. And I've lived in Oakland for the last 23 years. And I actually have, for some of the people who watch your show, they may remember that I'm the one that filed the lawsuit against Oakland for violations of Measure Y because Oakland citizens were promised 803 police officers back in 2004. And then they didn't deliver. We were promised a community policing officer in each beat. We didn't get that. So I ended up suing the city on that issue and also on the issue of them using Measure Y funds for things that should have been coming out of the general fund, like recruiting officers and hiring officers and that sort of thing. And ultimately, I prevailed in the Superior Court. The city then appealed, and unfortunately, the decision was reversed. But what I hope people remember from that lawsuit is that taxpayers were lied to, that we were promised police staffing of 803. They got up to that number very briefly, and it's been far below that ever since. And the city keeps coming back to the taxpayers, year after year, asking us to approve additional taxes with promises, we'll do this, we'll do that. And after the Measure Y thing, I don't think any taxpayer really should be believing the city's promises. I currently have a pending lawsuit against the city for a whole slew of things, but of particular relevance right now is chronic failure to comply with the Public Records Act. And that lawsuit has been pending for a couple of years now. And the way this issue got brought to my attention was I learned that there were several residents out there who had filed Public Records Act requests for video footage and documentation on what happened in the city clerk's office on August 12th. And the city was being incredibly slow. Not just slow, they just weren't responding at all to those Public Records Act requests. So I agreed to help these citizens get those documents that they needed because there was some suspicion that in particular, Sheng Tao had not made the filing deadline on August 12th, and we wanted to get to the bottom of that. And I thought this was an important issue, and time was of the essence. So So because I've got this active lawsuit against the city, I'm in communication with this Oakland City Attorney's Office on a fairly regular basis. And so I got the City Attorney's Office involved. I filed a formal complaint with the Public Ethics Commission to mediate the dispute, and that really got the ball rolling. And we ended up finally getting most of the documents that we needed for this particular issue that we're investigating. So that's kind of my relevant background.
You also wrote you wrote something I thought was intriguing, because I was told about the Shangtao incident by a number of different people, but it seemed to almost have stopped. It didn't go anywhere in terms of the conversation. But for the audience, I want to basically recite what Marleen sent to me for presentation at oaklandnewsonline.com. This is a formal complaint alleging possible unprofessional and unethical conduct by the city clerk's office in Oakland, election tampering, and possible violations of the elections code. I'm filing this complaint because I am concerned about transparency and accountability in Oakland. In brief, Marleen has explained it, that the Oakland City Clerk's office knowingly and intentionally backdated and misstated the time that official mayoral candidate documents were filed with the City Clerk's office on the afternoon of August 12th, 2012. And I remind you that we broke that story here at Zinni 62 thanks to Derek Sue's reporting on that day, vlogging actually on that day, but I digress. Specifically, Marleen continues, paperwork that was required by law to be received no later than 5 p.m. on that date was received after 5 p.m., but was time-stamped to make it appear, listen to this, folks, it was time-stamped to make it appear that the materials were received prior to, that means before, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, but was time-stamped to make it appear that the materials were received prior to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Marleen continues, I have spoken to 3 mayoral candidates who have informed me that the time indicated on their paperwork is wrong and that they were actually in the city clerk's office at a time very different than indicated on the time-stamped paperwork. I have also spoken to the assistant city clerk, Krystal Sams, who admitted that the paperwork was stamped before, get this, prior to 5 p.m. because it had to be stamped before 5 p.m., even though it was after 5 p.m. During that same conversation, however, Ms. Sams claimed that the time stamping machine was malfunctioning, and that this explained the fact that the time stamp was incorrect. Interesting. For reasons explained in more detail below, as I'm reading to you on oaklandnewsonline.com, I have reason to question Ms. Sams' claims that the time stamping machine was malfunctioning. I'll stop right there. Wow. I mean, it is said that city appearances of corruption are either just that or incompetence. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you why this is happening, but there were a lot of mistakes made on August 12th, and I think that this is just one of them. I mean, in the days leading up to August 12th, the candidates were told that they actually had until August 17th to get their paperwork filed. Then at the last minute, for whatever reason, the city clerk reevaluated her reading or got a different opinion from the city attorney's office on the actual deadline. And then there's this last minute, panic, trying to get the candidates down to City Hall before the actual deadline, which turned out to be August 12th. So that was a huge blunder. And then there was another blunder the following week when Alyssa Victory was told that several of her signatures were going to be tossed because they weren't registered voters. And the city basically told her, you're disqualified, you're not going to appear on the ballot for that reason. And she fought back and said, nowhere does it say that they have to be registered voters. And ultimately, the city had to back down on that because, I mean, I haven't researched that particular issue, but I presume that she was right, that it didn't actually say that. So, those are two huge blunders
That's right.
that all, basically came to fruition on the same day. And then, then I start hearing, like there was this rush at this office, not made it in before 5 o'clock. And that is, that may or may not be an important issue for a qualification. It may not necessarily disqualify the candidates. Like, it could be that the elections code is interpreted to mean that you just need to make it through the front door of City Hall by 5 p.m. and that's good enough. And then any delays caused by the city, are not your fault, and the paperwork should still be accepted. So, I'm not saying that any of these candidates should have been disqualified on that basis. I'm not an elections lawyer. I don't know what the law is on that. But it appeared in, based on the paperwork that I've reviewed, and I've looked at all of the documentation that was filed by the candidates on that day. We finally did get that documentation. I've looked at all of it, and I've also talked to Krystal Sams, and it does appear that she was under the impression that the paperwork needed to be filed no later than 5 p.m. on that day. So, initially when I talked to her, she basically said, well, it's all stamped before 5 because that's the requirement, and then, when I was kind of cross-examining her about it a little bit more, and we get into this whole subject of the broken time stamping machine, which had come up in an earlier conversation that she had with one of the candidates, Seneca Scott. Then it's kind of like she's alternating between explanations for the wrong timestamps. It's like, well, we stamped it before 5 because that's the rule. It has to be stamped. It has to be received before 5, and then it was like, oh, but the time stamping machine was broken and that's why the times are wrong. And so, I really do have reason to question her credibility, and like how much of it is just, her trying to cover up for her own mistakes, how much of this is corruption, that I can't answer. But it really does look suspicious. I've looked at all the paperwork, and there are several candidates who were not in the city clerk's office at the same time, who have their paperwork stamped at 3:54. And, like one of whom is Seneca Scott. And he's like, I was not in the city clerk's office at 3:54. I didn't get there until close to 4:30. And that time is just wrong. And, Greg Hodges' paperwork is stamped at 3:54. He never saw Greg Hodge because he was there much later. And then some of Alyssa Victory's paperwork is stamped at 3:54. She didn't get there until, right at 5. And all of her paperwork is, the rest of her paperwork is stamped at 3:54. And then I look at Shang Tao's paperwork, who didn't get there until after Alyssa Victory. So either right at 5 or shortly after 5. And her paperwork is also, kind of like a hodgepodge of stamps. And, the bottom line is that we also have emails from Shang Tao that she sent to the city clerk, in all likelihood while she was standing at the front desk, because the city clerk was asking people, well, I need you to email me this. I need you to email me that. One email is dated at around 5:10. Another email is dated at around 5:50. And so that there's no way that her paperwork was processed, before 5:50, because that documentation was then incorporated into other documentation that is stamped at 4:54 when it should have probably been stamped like 5:54. So it's pretty clear that the stamp is way off. And then, we've got this story about the broken timestamp machine. Well, when there's this much scrutiny on the election, and there've already been these two huge embarrassing errors, like the accuracy of the timestamping machine and the timeliness of people's materials is really critical. And so if you're worried about a timestamping machine being broken, like you'd think that would have been addressed immediately. Like, oh my God, we have this unreliable time stamping machine. This needs to be repaired immediately. This needs to be replaced immediately. You'd think there would be emails to, other people. Like, I'm concerned that the time stamping machine was like, malfunctioning throughout the day, and some of these timestamps may be off. But no, I asked for all documents indicating that the time stamping machine was malfunctioning that day. And the only documents that were produced to me by the city clerk's office were a quote on a new time stamping machine and an order for an order for a new time stamping machine, like an invoice and the date it was received. And the order was not placed until September 6th, which was weeks after this machine allegedly went, on the fritz. And then they don't get it for another several weeks. So it's just it doesn't add up.
I just want to add, for those who just joined us, this is Marleen Sachs, Oakland lawyer, who's filed a complaint against the Oakland City Clerk's office. Marleen, hey, Marleen, something else I wanted to ask. On that day, that August, actually 12th, Derek Sue posted a video. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but the reason why I mentioned it is that it's another issue that is adjunctly related to what you're focused on, whereas Derek and Monisha and a number of candidates say that they were told that the date of the time that they were supposed to have their signatures in was the 17th of August and not the 12th, because there's not an incumbent running for re-election as mayor. Did you see what Derek had said? I can play it real quick.
I haven't seen the video. I know that that's what candidates were told. I know that candidates were told it's August 17th, and then at the last minute they were told no, it's August 12th.
Yeah, Derek first posted that before anybody else on that very day, and I happened to see that. And election. Let's see here if I can get that. It was August 15th, August 17th. And he called it a miscommunication. I'll post it.
Inflation remains persistent.
All right, here. And then I'll go over to StreamYard, and I'll go to here, share screen, here, and here, right here. I will play that now.
High.
The recession is well underway.
While inflation soars, Senator Warnock and D.C. liberals voted for higher taxes. Tell Senator Warnock we need a tax break. Stop raising our taxes.
Okay.
Drinking warm water before bed erases years of damage to teeth and gums. People are reversing decay and repair.
Here we go.
Welcome back, everybody. Derek Sue, your 2022 Oakland Mayoral Candidate. Well, I want to bring you up on something here that occurred yesterday, Friday, and this would be August.
Yeah, he's about to say it.
12th. Today is Saturday, August 13th. And when I went to go get my nomination or nominees petitions and the final paperwork to do my mayoral candidacy for the ballot, I was at the appointment, and a lot of things were explained to me. And so anyway, long story short, I've been having problems with receiving mail, any email from the politics, the political commission here in Oakland, the city clerk's office. When I was first given all the information, I made sure that they had my correct email address, which is suederek@yahoo.com. It's the one that I've used throughout all my campaign. It's the email that I use for my personal email. So I get a majority of my emails on yahoo.com. I do have a Gmail account, but I don't use it that often, and I only use it for specific reasons. So I just don't use Gmail much, but I do use my Yahoo. So when they said that they were sending out all this information, I never received it. And then yesterday I called into the Ethics Commission and the City Clerk's office and asked for the PDF link so that I could complete my candidate statement. And that was yesterday morning at, I believe it was 9 o'clock in the morning, so it was early. And how I do remember is that I watched a certain TV show at that time. And so that show was on when the clerk's office picked up. I went ahead and turned the TV volume down and did my talk with Krystal and Krystal Sams at the City Clerk's office, and let her know that I had not received that link. And what that link does, it allows me to go ahead and file my candidacy statement and have it all online before I actually even do the filing. And so that's a big time saver for the clerk's office so that they don't have to re-enter everything. But then also, here's the other thing. In that discussion, they spoke about the date, the final filing date, and then brought me to this page right here. And so I want you to see, these are the filing dates and what has to be done. And as you see right here, those are the 8 things that have to be filed, and that was yesterday. But here's the exception to the rule, and it was pointed out to me by Krystal, and said you actually have until Wednesday, August 17th, right here. Right there, you see it right there. You have till August 17th to file all of that. And the reason is because this is for all offices without an incumbent running. And so since Libby has termed out, there's no incumbent running. And so this is in effect. And I was told that by the Public Ethics Commission and Krystal Sams at the City Clerk's office, that I have till then to file all of my paperwork. And so yesterday what happened, I got a call in the late afternoon by someone. She just said that she was from the Public Ethics Commission, and letting me know that all of my paperwork was due yesterday by 5 o'clock. And I let her know that I was alerted to the fact that I have until the 17th because there is no incumbent. And so we got into a discussion, and the outcome was, well, you do what you have to do. Because I argued the point, and she had no real answer. She said, well, tell you what, just come in Monday and file your paperwork, which is what was my full intention and plan to do on Monday the 15th. And I explained to her, or she tried to say, is there any paperwork that you can file today? I said no, because my volunteers are still out with my nominee petitions, helping me to get all of those 100 signatures that are necessary, or actually the 50 qualified, but 100 is the suggested that should be going in there. So anyway, a lot of miscommunication, and I'm going to see what happens on Monday. Hopefully everything goes smoothly. All the paperwork gets accepted by the city clerk's office, and I'm on the ballot. However, if the Public Ethics Commission breaks their own rule in their book that clearly states that I have till Wednesday, August 17th to file last deadline to file items 1 through 8 above. This is for all offices without an incumbent running.
How to get ripped within 30 days without Jim and
I
Dive.
get the gist.
Genius US Navy SEALs device to get in.
Okay,
I
that's
get the gist. I think you can pause the interview there with Mr. Sue.
absolutely. And there's Derek actually made a comment here. He says, I had spoken to Ms. Sams that morning at 9 a.m. regarding another issue. She made no mention that the nomination deadline was later that day. And he says another clerk from the office called him 2 hours before the deadline of August 12th. This really seems to dovetail with what you're doing, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like as I said earlier, I was aware of these other mistakes that had been made. At the time I started doing my digging, and it's just it's appalling that candidates were given the wrong information and that they were disqualified as a result. It probably is just incompetence by a variety of people at City Hall, but it's incompetence at a very high level.
Actually, to me, it looks blatant. And the reason why I say that is, first of all, it's right there in black and white. And second, now that I look at ranked choice voting, which is 5 and not 3 this time, which really leaves a wide open race, I emailed Tim Dupuy, our registrar of voters, our director, our registrar in Alameda County. I said, hey, how come there was no, dun, 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 da, 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 saying, hey, it's 5 choices and let's get the word out and da, 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 right? No answer. No, nothing. No press release. There was 0 attempt to inform the public of this new development with ranked choice voting, which is earth-shaking. And my question is why? And it's easy for people to sort of dismiss things and say, oh, it's incompetence. I learned this actually from the late Richard Winnie. Public officials get to be at their title not by being incompetent, but by being savvy. Okay? And you may be prone to say something about them, but that's the little battle within the war. They won the war. You know what I mean?
Well, so I do a lot of representation of public entities too. So I have kind of an inside view of how a lot of government agencies work. And I, based on that experience, I'm much more inclined to believe that this was a mistake and it was not intentional, because no government entity wants this kind of attention brought on them. I mean, this is, they got a lot of negative publicity about this. It made the news. People were horribly, horribly embarrassed, or should be horribly embarrassed by these errors. And, there was no way it wasn't going to come out. I mean, when you've got major candidates, not just minor candidates, being told at the 11th hour, you need to get down here by 5 p.m. That's going to get some attention. And when you disqualify a candidate who is also a lawyer, that is going to get some attention. Like I honestly don't believe that the people in City Hall have the wherewithal to come up with this kind of conspiracy. Like that's giving them way too much credit, Zenny. Way too much.
Can I bet you $1,000 you're wrong? I'm serious. I'm serious. I've been around this 37 years. I would bet $1,000. Okay, I'll raise it $5,000.
All right. I don't bet.
I do. $5,000 says you're wrong. I've been the target of these things. Okay. So they want you to think that because then they win. Because at the end of the day, they do win.
I think this is giving them too much credit.
Fine.
They are not, I don't think they're strategizing like that.
Oh yeah, they do it. Elihu told me something when I worked for him as economic advisor. He said, Zinni, there are 1,000 games played in City Hall every day. The question for you is, which one do you want to play? There's always games going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that way for decades.
Well, I do think that this issue with the why the timestamp is wrong, I do believe that there's intentionality there. But I think the intentionality was to cover up, other mistakes, like the fact that there was going to be this mad rush of candidates coming down to City Hall to get their paperwork filed, that they knew that the error was, going to be blamed on them or somebody else in City Hall. And so it's like, oh, let's just make sure everything is stamped before 5. So it looks like it's kosher, even though when it's like really going to be a gray area. And that, that's my issue. My issue is that is not how government officials should be handling very sensitive, very important documentation, like filing papers for mayor. It's in essence, it's forgery. Like if the papers were processed at 5:55, the stamp needs to say 5:55. And, if a decision is made, well, we're going to accept it because they made it through the door of City Hall before 5, and that's all we can ask of people, then that's legit. But backstamping something to make it look like it was received before it actually was, and then coming up with a belated story of a broken machine, that's not legit. Like, that is not how government should run. And so I am asking that this matter be fully investigated by somebody at City Hall. I filed it with the city auditor's office. Somebody needs to look into this. I've also filed it with the Secretary of State, and because it creates, an election tampering issue. And, in this day and age, when people are concerned about the legitimacy of elections and election tampering, and, on both sides, people want there to be trust in our electoral system. And so this kind of stuff really throws shade on, how legitimate is the system. And if there are people acting in inappropriate ways who have positions of power, and have the power to influence an election in such an important way, then I think that needs to be looked into.
One moment, please, Marleen. Just give me
No problem.
1 second.
Okay.
Okay, we're back. Great. Awesome. So what are your next steps here? Oh, Derek Sue explains, he writes here, I was told it was easier for me to get elected to a state or regional position than to survive the Oakland political election process and expected to be elected. Next steps, Marleen, and if anybody else is watching this and has been impacted by it, how can they contact you?
So I have a website, lawofficeofmarleensachs.com. You can contact me through my email and phone number on that website. And hopefully I will hear back from the city auditor's office and the Secretary of State and hear that they are processing the complaint. And all I'm asking is that it be investigated thoroughly. That, and by the way, one of the things that I do in my regular job is I'm an investigator. So I do employment law, and I investigate employee misconduct all the time. And, an offense of this gravity, if it's true, should result in termination. I mean, this is such, if the allegations are substantiated, that's such an abuse of power and such an abuse of trust that it should result in termination. I take no pleasure in, getting employees fired in a situation like this, but trust in the process has to be maintained. And so, an adequate investigation would include a review of all the documents that I have provided to the relevant investigating agencies, and would include interviews with the people who are witnesses, and that would include I actually spoke personally to 3 of the mayoral candidates who said, no, that's those timestamps are wrong. And that was Alyssa Victory, Seneca Scott, and Manisha Carter. I talked to all 3 of them. And so those people would need to be interviewed, and Shang, and the video footage that we asked for, it was originally requested on September 8th, and it's now October 25th. And we still haven't gotten it. Now the city attorney's office is apparently working diligently to try to get us copies of the video footage, but that'll show like when people were entering City Hall and when they were leaving, and it'll give more conclusive proof as to when people were coming and going, and like how off were these timestamps. But based on my own interviews with these people, it seems like they were off by quite a bit. So I'm just asking for a full investigation.
And I'll put together a playlist of all the interviews that were done. Manisha Carter is one of our vloggers now, as is Derek Sue, and we talked to everybody as it was happening. That was the wild thing. It was unfolding drama, and tearfully upsetting to a number of people. I don't think Manisha, among others, has gotten over it and what happened, because they work hard. They work hard to build their campaign and get their signatures and have them cross-checked and everything else. And I personally experienced how hard it was for them.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, thanks for allowing me to talk about this issue. I think it's important that people know that it's going on, and that they pay attention to the competence of their public officials.
Yeah, I'm glad you reached out, and I'm glad you came on. You got to come on back. Tell us about what you're up to.
I can come back at a later date and tell you all about my lawsuit.
Done. You got it. Got new glasses too. I love them. Looking great.
Thank you.
All right. See you later. Hey,
all
folks.
Right.
Marleen, stick around in the background, okay?
Okay.
Folks, join us at 8 o'clock Pacific, 11 o'clock, because Leanne Powell's coming on. She worked for Shang Tao and was fired because she refused to campaign for a mayoral election. So that should be an interesting occasion. 11 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Pacific, right here tonight. All right, that ends this broadcast. Stick around, Marleen. Thank you.